Morning. Welcome to Westside Christian Church. My name is Ethan Morton. I'm the youth and young adult pastor here, and I'm glad that you guys are here with us this morning. I want to give a shout out to all you moms out there and mother-like figures. We appreciate you. Happy Mother's Day. Thank you guys. You guys do, yeah. You guys do a lot of hard work. I'm not a mom, but I was once a kid, and teenagers are hard. Like, they test your patience. I work with teenagers, and they test my patience sometimes. And I only have to work with them like a couple hours a week, so you guys have fun. But no, seriously, we're very thankful for all that you guys do and the work that you do. This morning, I wanted to start us off with a question, a little bit of audience participation. I wanted to ask you guys, how many of you guys in the room, raise your hand, how many of you guys in the room are tired this morning? All right, some of you guys are so tired that you guys don't even raise your hands. Like, crazy. But no, seriously, like one of the things that you ask somebody how they're doing, they'll tell you three things. One of three things. They'll say, I'm good. That's my go-to. I say, I'm good. Or I'm busy. Or I'm tired. Like those are the three typical answers that you'll hear for someone. I'm good, busy, or tired. And being tired isn't unusual in the world we live in. In fact, the average American spends 4 hours a day feeling tired. That adds up to 1,500 hours a year of feeling tired all the time. Sometimes you get a good night's rest and you wake up the next morning and you still feel tired. And what do we do when we feel tired? Well, there's a couple of things we do. The two things we do, major things that we do, number one, is we try to distract from it. If we're tired, we make ourselves busy, like all the time. If I'm tired, like I'm just not gonna rest. Like there's too many things to do to rest, and so little time to do it. And number two, we take 3 shots of espresso. Right? We caffeine, we medicate our tiredness so that we don't have to feel tired. And those are our typical 2 responses to feeling tired. But I want to share a time when I felt like I was tired, and my tiredness went from being tired to being exhausted. Because it's really easy when you ignore your feelingness of being tired, it's really easy to go to being exhausted. And I have a time that I want to remember of that. So there's a story, and I'm at college, I'm in Bible college. This isn't too long ago. I was in my junior year, and I'm taking this really tough class. And the class I'm taking is with this professor who's known to challenge the students. Like it's this professor who's known to put students to the test. Like if you're going to take, you say his name at the college, like, oh, that must be a tough class. If you're taking a class with that professor. But ever since I was a little kid, I was like, I like the challenge. So, let's go do this. So about 2 weeks into the class, I realized I made a mistake for taking the course. It was a 2-credit class, but it felt like it was 3 credits. It was a lot more than I bargained for. I mean, I was reading probably 200 to 300 pages 1 or 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, like book report, boom, 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 just super busy. And that's on top of everything else that I'm doing in my life. I had a part-time job. Like there was just so many things going on. And so I remember one time about in the middle of the semester, where I began to study for this assignment. And before I realized it, it was 3 a.m. in the morning. And I'm up at 3 a.m. trying to turn this homework assignment. And I get it done, and I turn it in, and I get a good grade on the assignment. But what that night made me realize was that in my academics, life looked great. Like I was doing well. Like I was doing good. But underneath, behind the scenes, like every other area of my life was getting an F. I was failing. I was exhausted. My eyes were red. I was tired. I didn't have a social life. I spent most of my time in the library. So I wasn't doing well. and I was ignoring my need for rest. I was exhausted. I was worn out. And maybe you can relate to this a little bit. Maybe that's where you're at right now, or at least maybe you've been there at some point in your life where you're so tired, where you get to the point of being tired that you start to feel exhausted. And the typical views of rest that we have is when it comes to being tired, right, we ignore it or we medicate it. We try to distract from it because we think that rest is optional. We think that, rest, I can either choose to rest or I don't have to. And those who rest, they're probably weaker than I am because I don't have to rest. I'm doing great. Or we think that rest is maybe problematic in our lives. There's just too much stuff to do to have time to rest. I know there was times in school when I would have assignments and I knew if I took a break from homework and stuff that the homework would start to snowball and become more of a problem. So it would start to build up so that the time that I took to rest was more, there would be more work to do afterwards. You ever feel like that? Like the more you rest, the more work you have to do later? And so what happens when you get behind in work, you begin to try harder, right? You double down, you buckle up, you put your britches on and you get ready to go. But what happens, my question for you this morning is, what happens when trying harder doesn't work? What happens when you get to the end of your rope? What happens when you get to the end of the drive? Or what happens when you get to the end of your workday and it still wasn't enough? The feeling of hopelessness begins to set in. And that feeling of hopelessness usually translates into our spiritual lives as well, into our relationship with God. Have you ever found yourself saying to yourself, man, I didn't read my Bible enough this week? Or man, I didn't pray enough this week. I didn't do as much as I should have done this week. And it's almost like we make God out to be another burden, another thing to do, another thing on our to-do list, on the bottom of our to-do list that we just weren't able to check off. But that's not where God wants to be. He doesn't want to just be another burden. He doesn't want to just be another thing on our to-do list. In fact, when we're tired, God does not say to us, try harder or be better. That's not what God says to us. God says something different. And this morning, that's what we're going to look into. What does God say to us when we are tired? We're going to find that answer in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30. And it is in this passage where Jesus offers an invitation. And if you listen closely, you'll find that Jesus' invitation is this. Jesus is inviting you to rest in his finished work. Jesus is inviting you to rest in his finished work. And this is what he says in Matthew 11, starting in verse 28. He says, come to me. Very three simple words. Very simple invitation. Come to me. Who's he talking to? Who is he speaking to at this moment? Well, earlier in the chapter, we see that Jesus is going to these crowds and towns in Galilee. And he's speaking to these crowds of people. And some of these people, he's even condemning them because they have not repented. He's saying, woe to you guys, because I did these miracles and wonders and signs in your towns, and you still have not repented away. And yet he's urging them to have the faith of a child. And this is where he extends his invitation to even the people who rejected him. He extends this invitation to all who are weary and burdened. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. The main qualifications for accepting this invitation, or the main qualifications to even receive the invitation in the first place, is for you to be weary and for you to be burdened. Have you ever received the invitation before, though? So maybe it was to a wedding, or maybe it was to like a birthday party. You remember the first time you opened that and you saw your name written? Kind of felt special, right? Kind of felt a little bit important, like someone took time out of their day to invite me, like, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And then you begin to look at your calendar. And you begin to look at the weekend that that specific event is on. And you begin to realize that that's a busy weekend. And I don't know, this is going to be really hard for me to make it to this thing. And I know it's important, but it's going to be really hard for me to make it to that wedding. It's going to be really hard for me to make it to that party or that graduation. It's going to be really difficult. And so the invitation starts to feel more like a burden than an invitation. And what I want you not to do this morning is not to look at Jesus' invitation in your life as more of a burden, but look at it as more of a gift. Jesus says, and I will give you rest. It's a gift. It's a gift of rest. It's not something that you have to work for. It is something that is given. And all you need to do is simply come to him. But this is where things get a little tricky. We would love to stop here at this verse, but it continues. And this is where things get a little dicey. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. You guys know what a yoke is? A yoke is a tool that is used by a farmer or someone on two animals to help pull something behind them, like a plow or something. Essentially, it's a tool that's used to put animals to work. And once you know what a yoke is, you begin to ask this question. You begin to ask, okay, so Jesus said, I will give you rest. Whoa, 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 whoa. Jesus, what is this about a yoke? Are you about to put me to work, Jesus? Because you just said you were going to give me rest. Now it sounds like you're about to put me to work. That's crazy. I don't know about this rest thing. It sounds like Jesus is contradicting himself, but he's not. He continues, and we will get to the bottom of this tension. He continues, he says, his very nature, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. For I am gentle and lowly in heart. And who Jesus is will help us understand what his rest and his work is and how these pieces fit together. When Jesus says that I am gentle and lowly in heart, he's saying that he associates with sinners. He's saying that he came down, even though he was God, even though he was the Son of God, he came down as a man to be with you and me. Not only does he associate with sinners, but he loves hanging out with sinners. In the Gospels, we see Jesus hanging out with sinners more than we think. I mean, he picks fishermen to be his disciples. He goes over Zacchaeus' house, a tax collector. He spends time with the people that we wouldn't have thought that such a Messiah would spend time with. But that's because he loves to spend time with people. Specifically, he loves to spend time with people who are weary and burdened, because that's who he is in his heart. This is the only passage in the Bible that actually tells us who Jesus is in his heart. At the very core of who Jesus is, he's gentle and lowly. If there was a Facebook bio for Jesus, in the bio it would say gentle and lowly, because that is who Jesus is in his heart. And his promise to us, being gentle and lowly, he says, and you will find rest for your souls. And you will find rest for your souls. All right, so on one hand, we're talking about, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. How is Jesus supposed to put us to work, and then we're supposed to find rest for our souls? This doesn't make any sense. Well, let me tell you a little bit about what the word soul here means. Soul means not just like a psychological idea, but a person, their whole being, life itself. And when he's saying that you're going to find rest for your souls, he's saying you're going to find rest for your life. Something that your whole life has been deprived of, something that your whole soul has been deprived of is rest. And because your soul has been deprived of rest, Jesus is extending this invitation to those who are weary and burdened. He says, "For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." And he continues, he says, "For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." So this is full of contradictions. Okay, so Jesus said that take my yoke upon you, and yet we know what a yoke is. A yoke is something you put on animals to put them to work. And yet this same thing that you put on animals to put them to work, he says that this is light and easy. Somehow, the work that Jesus has for us is related to the rest that Jesus has for us. I got these buckets here with me. And each of these buckets represents a different thing. This is our bucket. And it's full of stuff. And this is God's bucket. And in this bucket, there's a lot of stuff. And each of these things represents something different in our lives that we have going on. Something that we're trying to control in our lives. Something that we're trying to manage and hold everything all together. So for some of you guys this morning, it might be a job, work, which is what this represents. I usually don't wear a tie. For those of you who know me, that's pretty normal. But this represents work. And we try to hold work all together and try to hold it all together, but oftentimes with our jobs, things get hectic and crazy. And we start working overtime. We pick up the extra shifts on the weekend, and things start to get out of our control. Or maybe we just don't have time to clean our house. Ever been there? You look around at your house and you realize it's been a minute since we had our last meeting. And if you live alone like me, I never had to clean my house. So, or maybe you have that one project that you still haven't gotten to yet, that you keep saying that you're going to get to, but you still haven't gotten to yet. Or maybe in life you have homework that you need to do, assignments that still have not gotten done for Monday, tomorrow, which is their due. So if you have homework, you should probably do that today. Just a reminder. Maybe every now and then you can fit in a little bit of rest, maybe some good sleep habits. Try to get those 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night, even though it's probably pretty hard to do for some of us. And if you got time, maybe you can fit in a couple hobbies, maybe read a book or two, do a couple things that you enjoy. And maybe you have a couple people you know who are doing sports right now. Go to a couple of your kids' games or go to someone else's games. This takes up a lot of time. You have all sorts of things in this bucket that takes up a bunch of time. And usually what we try to do is we try to add things to this. And we try to add God to this bucket. This is the Bible. And we try to fit him in on top of everything that's going on in our lives and put him on that to-do list of, man, I need to read my Bible, or I need to pray, or I need to spend time with God. I should probably go to church. I should probably add this to my schedule. It's a lot. I'm already doing a lot. And eventually you get to a certain point in your life where this bucket starts to overfill. And there's just too much to do and so little time to do it. And that's usually when we're the most exhausted. That's usually the most when they're the most tired. And what this passage is saying, when Jesus is inviting us to rest in his finished work, is to take these things one at a time and to begin to put them in this bucket, into his bucket, to give them over to him, to let go and give it to God. So with our jobs, things that we can't manage, things that we can't control, we're trying to do a good job, and sometimes we don't measure up, even in our work scenarios. But we decide to give it to him and let him have control of that area of our life. With our homes, There's a lot of things we're stressed out about, having to clean up all these different areas of the house that we just haven't gotten to yet, but we give it over to God. With our hobbies, we've had a tough time trying to find even time to do our hobbies that we really enjoy, that gives us a lot of peace, a lot of joy, a lot of rest. And we just haven't had time to do it, but we give it over to God. When it comes to our sleep, the sleep that we desperately need, and maybe we haven't been getting enough sleep lately, or maybe we haven't had the best sleep habits, and it seems like it's out of our control, we give it to God. With our homework assignments that we're trying so hard to do well on, and maybe we get a B, and we're not super happy with it, we still give it to God. With sports, things that our schedules get crazy with sports, and we try to make it to every game, but we're not able to make it to every game, or we try to do well in sports, and we try to measure up for our coaches and play a good game, and sometimes we fall short of that, but we give it to God. With all the things that we just haven't gotten to yet, the projects that have gotten lost in the busyness and the chaos, we give it over to God. And finally, we recognize that God isn't just another burden in our life. That God isn't just another thing on our to-do list. And that He doesn't just want us to read our Bibles every day. He doesn't just want us to pray every day. He wants to have our entire life. He wants us to give Him our entire life, every care and every burden that we could possibly have. He doesn't want us to feel spiritually guilty all of the time for all the things that we're not doing in relationship with Him. He just wants us to come to Him. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." When we take the things that we're trying to control that we ultimately aren't able to control, and we give them over to God, it becomes a whole lot light. All the things that we had been carrying with us this whole time, that was a heavy bucket that was wearing us down, we give it over to God, and we're not in control of it anymore. He's in control, and that's a scary thing when we come to God for rest, because we don't know what to expect. We don't necessarily know what to anticipate. We have to have faith in God that He's going to take care of it all, and that we give it to Him and we trust in Him. And this is what Jesus' finished work is all about. Because Jesus did the work that we never could, to give us the rest that we didn't deserve. When Jesus died on the cross, it was a work that we couldn't accomplish, something that we couldn't do, or something that we couldn't control in our lives, the sin and the things that were unmanageable in our lives. When we give it over to God, we let Him take control. And then we begin to build our life on the foundation of Jesus Christ, to build it on Him, and His work completes us and not our work. And everything else in our lives falls under Him as Lord. And this is where the magic happens. Because when we place everything under the lordship of Christ, we begin to take joy in what we do on a day-to-day basis, our ordinary lives. We begin to realize that it's no longer about us, but it's about other people. It's about how we share God's blessings that we've already received, His work that He's already done in our lives with other people. Imagine what it looks like if we begin to take this concept, if we begin to rest in Jesus, what Jesus has already done for us, to accept Jesus' invitation to rest in His finished work in every area of our lives. Worship team, imagine how that would change things in our communities, in our relationships, with our families, how things would start to come into place, how we wouldn't be exhausted all the time. And that doesn't mean that life's not going to be hard, because this bucket is still full of a lot of stuff. And yet, we recognize that God's got it, that He's taking care of it, and that we have to trust in Him in every area of our life. Maybe for you this morning, maybe you haven't met Jesus. Maybe you still haven't accepted his invitation in your life. Maybe you haven't given your life over to Jesus yet, and you're still trying to control things. You're still trying to control everything that's in this bucket and keep it manageable. And you're exhausted and you're tired of it. You're tired of being tired. Jesus is inviting you with all your burdens, with all your weariness, to be able to come to him and lay them down at the foot of the cross. In fact, the weariness that you have and the burdens that you have qualify you for his invitation to come to him. For he is gentle and lowly in heart. That is who he is. Jesus is like a glass of water on a hot day. When you're dehydrated, most of us don't even know when we're dehydrated. Some of you guys in this room maybe are dehydrated. When you drink a glass of water and you're dehydrated, you realize what you had been missing all along. And you hadn't realized how long you had gone without water. It's like that with Jesus. When we have Jesus in our lives, we begin to realize how long we went without him. And so the invitation is for you. Accept the invitation. And for the Christians in the room who've already accepted God's invitation, Jesus' invitation, who have come into his rest, remember the first time that you gave your life over to Jesus. Remember the freedom that you felt, the relief, the weight lifted off of your shoulders by giving it all over to him. And then life began to happen and busyness started to happen, and you began to try to take things from this bucket and put them back in your bucket because you weren't sure what was going to happen. That's how life happens. I want to challenge you this week to, every day, to take a look at your to-do list for that day or your agenda for that day. And just pray over those things. Pray over your schedule of all the things that's going on. And just give them one by one over to God. Give each of your cares over to God because he cares for you. See, when we begin to accept what Jesus is inviting us, our life will change, our relationships will change, our community will change. It will no longer be about us, but it will be about other people because we are firm on what Christ has done. Jesus is inviting you to rest in his finished work. Don't miss the invitation.